Amen. Amen. Let me now call on Elizabeth to please go through the news before we hand the mic to one of the minister of communication, please. To just few minutes.
Good afternoon. Updates for today, Thursday, 17th November 2022. His Excellency President Dr. Julius Maada has last Thursday, 10th November 2022, received Sierra Leone Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Validation Report, which states that the country's achievement of a high score of 87.5 is truly remarkable. The Ministry of Finance, last Friday, 11th November 2022, presented the government's budget and statement of economic and financial policies for the financial year 2023. The Honorable Minister of Information and Communications, Mohammed Aman Sware, on the 11th and 12th November 2022, participated in the Paris Peace Forum and International Fund for Public Interest Media in Paris, France. His Excellency President Dr. Julius Maada on Tuesday, 15th November 2022, launched a 3-day National Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship Fair at the Freetown International Conference Center at Aberdeen in Freetown. The Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Act 2022 has on Tuesday, 15th November 2022 been enacted in Parliament. Today, the 17th November 2022 in Lusaka, Zambia, the Minister of Information and Communications, Mohammed Aman Sware, was on a panel this morning discussing robust connectivity, access and digital capacity with colleague ministers from the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I will now call on the Honorable Deputy Minister of Information to give the opening remarks and then the introduction address.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Rose. First, I think it's important for us to lend appreciation to the Ministry of Health and Sanitation for hosting us. We are all fully aware that the escalator is not functioning at the moment, and we knew that that would pose significant challenge to accessing the 8th floor, where we normally host the government's press briefing. And so we want to express sincere thanks and appreciation to the Ministry of Health and Sanitation. So until the escalator becomes functional, we may have to get some kind of a standing arrangement with this ministry that they would indulge us to be using this facility for the purpose of hosting our weekly press briefing. As you can see, to my right and to my left, we have two distinguished personalities. First, to my right, a phenomenal woman, somebody whose footprint has become very indelible, very compelling. You cannot talk about Sierra Leone's progress without mentioning this milestone achievement. And first of all, I think across party lines, across interests, and across vocations, across disciplines, I think all of us as Sierra Leoneans must be very proud for what we have achieved, and for that I ask all of us to give her a round of applause for the enactment of a first in the history gender equality and women's empowerment law. So when you go out there, you no longer, it's not countries like Rwanda that will be trumpeting this. Now, all over the world, people are acclaiming Sierra Leone for what we have been able to achieve, and I think this is important for the women in Sierra Leone. So the distinguished Minister for Gender and Children's Affairs will share with us critical highlights of this very important legislation, what this means for women, what this means for Sierra Leone, and how it is important for all of us to support her in launching a massive public education and awareness raising around this, because this is important. And I think it was Mary Robinson who said you can't claim your rights if you don't know them. So if people don't know that they have such an important thing for them, how can they really claim their rights. To my left, we have the distinguished economist. As a matter of fact, the chief economist at the Ministry of Finance. I am sure this gentleman needs no introduction, but as a formality, the chief economist of the ministry, distinguished Alimani Bangura. As we know, the budget has been read, statement of economic and financial policies, and it is important that we try to also share those very key provisions, what this means for us, national development, budgetary allocations to ministries. Before coming here, I was just, the Chancellor in UK was presenting his autumn statement, and you could see that the entire nation has been on edge. So we know anytime the budget is read, people want to know exactly what it means for us. And for the ordinary man in the street, what it means for bread and butter, what it means for XYZ. And so we are so privileged that we have these two distinguished persons. But first, I will give the floor to the distinguished Minister for Gender and Children's Affairs, Honorable Manty Tarawallie, to talk to us about this huge achievement. And I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Minister, and thank you everybody for coming today to this important press briefing. Let me start by also repeating that the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act 2022 was enacted into law by the House of Parliament on Tuesday, the 15th November 2022. The Act is a fulfillment of the 2018 SLPP Manifesto Promise and a commitment in the Medium-Term National Development Plan 2018 to 2023 made by His Excellency Dr. Julius Maada Bio, the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. The purpose of the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act is to address the gender imbalances by making provisions for increased appointments of women to decision-making positions and structures so as to achieve at least 30% representation, to provide for the promotion of gender equality in employment and training, to provide for the implementation of gender mainstreaming and budgeting, to provide for the implementation of provision for financial institutions to prescribe procedures for the improvement of women's access to finance, and to provide for other related matters. Before we go into the benefits for the country and for women, let's just give a little background. Why did we do this? Why are we doing this? Sierra Leone, as it stands today, has a gender inequality index value of 0.644 and ranked 153 out of 165 countries. The gender inequality index is a metric that shows the loss in potential human development due to the disparity between females and male achievement. While gender inequality is a universal issue in Sierra Leone, today in Sierra Leone, men earn 3 times more than women in wage employment, 2.5 times more in self-employment, and 2 times more in agriculture. Also today, in 2018, only 17 women out of 146 parliamentarians were elected. And at local level, female representation decreased from 19% in 2012 to 17% in 2018. Also in 2019, 62% of women 18 to 14 reported having experienced physical or sexual violence. So that is the background. That is why it was necessary to come up with this law. As a result of this, the executive arm of government, led by His Excellency the President, recognized the disparity and so showed his commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment as a means of attaining sustainable peace and social and economic development in the country. This commitment, which includes human capital development, free quality education, and youth participation, are the bedrock that anchors the visionary leadership of His Excellency the President. Evidence of this commitment can be found in the Medium-Term National Development Plan and also CILNAC 2, which strengthens women's efforts in conflict prevention, resolution, and peace building, while providing early response mechanisms for addressing sexual and gender-based violence in conflict and non-conflict situations. And also, another demonstration of commitment is the creation of the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs in November 2019, with the sole responsibility for leading the planning, development, implementation, and monitoring of to women and children below 18. Driven by this unanimous goal, the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs developed the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Policy in 2022. The policy the precipice, which was possible from a combination of efforts. One, the adoption of the GIRI policy, and two, implementation of economic empowerment projects for women. However, with the enactment of this new law now, which prohibits Gender and Women's Empowerment Act, so the act came out from the policy. On the 21st of October 2021, I, the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, introduced the bill in Parliament and conducted the first reading. That was October 2021. The Honourable House of Parliament, in its wisdom, directed me to conduct an extended national consultation exercise on the bill. As directed by the House, the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs developed an inclusive consortium of partners comprising interest groups, NGOs and CSOs, and led the consortium to undertake an extensive national consultation exercise. The exercise reached over 10,000 men and women, principally through two approaches. One, digital consultations through social media platforms, and B, in-person meetings across all 16 districts. The Ministry also held consultations with individual parliamentarians, the leadership of Parliament, Parliamentary Gender Committee, and the Parliamentary Female Caucus. Engagements with the National Electoral Commission and the Political Party Registration Commission were also undertaken. Significant recommendations from those consultations were adopted by the Ministry and shared with partners and interest groups for consensus. So on Wednesday, the 9th of November 2022, 1 year later, I presented the consultation report to Parliament and conducted the second reading. Thereafter, the bill was sent to the Legislative Committee. The committee met on Saturday, the 12th November. And again on Tuesday, the 15th November, the Legislative Committee, headed by the Chairman, Honourable Moe Conte, presented the committee's report to Parliament, and I conducted the third reading, and the bill was passed into law. So what does this act mean for Sierra Leone and for the women? First and foremost, as has been said by so many people, this is a historic piece of legislation. It is a groundbreaking law. It affirms President Julius Maada's Bio's unwavering commitment to placing women at the center of national development, to transforming the lives of women, to providing for the statutory employment, to the representation of women, to promoting and protecting women's rights, and to creating a progressive Sierra Leone. This act will create over 5,000 jobs for women. The act addresses gender imbalances with a specific focus on women in the following ways. At least 30% representation in cabinet. While the Constitution protects the powers of the President, to freely select his cabinet. The Act encourages the President to ensure at least 30% to be women. At least 30% representation in Parliament. This is in conjunction with the Public Elections Act, Section 59, which states that nominations should include a woman in every 3 names. At least 30% of all appointments in diplomatic service will be women. At least 30% of all appointments in local councils will be women. At least 30% of all appointments in the civil service will be women. At least 30% of all appointments in private institutions with 25 or more employees will be women. Maternity leave extended from 12 weeks to 14 weeks. Financial inclusion included. The bill will give powers to the Ministry of Finance and also to the Bank of Sierra Leone to come up with new methodologies to increase access to finance for women. Mainstreaming gender requirements across all sectoral policies and legal frameworks. This is an important and extremely important provision. What it means is that every sector, every ministry is now mandated by the law to ensure that their policies include the gender demands. For example, if agriculture is doing their sectoral policy, or they must review their sectoral policy to include in there that beneficiaries should be a minimum of 30% should be women. Gender responsive budgeting. This has already been accepted by the Ministry of Finance as the way forward, but now it's mandated by law that the Ministry of Finance national budgets should be done in a gender responsive budgeting format. The Act prohibits sexual harassment as stipulates in the Sexual Offences Act 2019. The Act also prohibits dismissal from work due to pregnancy. The Act mandates the creation of a multi-sectoral gender steering committee to oversee the implementation of this Act. What are the next steps? The Act is to be assented by the President, signed by the President, so we are going to be pushing for that to be done as soon as possible. Thereafter, the Ministry will lead the development of the regulations, what will guide the implementation of the Act. Once those procedures have been carried out, then we will commence the mass communication of popularizing the Act across the entire country. As a ministry, we will not be able to do that all by ourselves, so we will bring our partners together and form a consortium or a network so that we can populate and disseminate the information across the country. So let me end by using this opportunity to thank His Excellency the President, Dr. Julius Maada Bio, for his commitment to the empowerment of women and the support that he's given to the process of gender equality. This is a huge opportunity for women, and I really, this is also a very important point, I urge all women to take this seriously and start to prepare themselves to take advantage of these opportunities that are presented in this Act. The ministry, my ministry, the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs, will continue to lead the gender agenda in Sierra Leone and to ensure the full implementation of this Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act. Thank you.
We don't usually clap at press briefings, but this one is so inviting, and I must thank you again, Madam Minister. I think this, for me, would be perhaps the biggest package any president would have given to women in Sierra Leone. And I say this without any iota of hesitation. Thank you, Madam Minister, and thank you for pursuing the President's agenda on this. So this is promise made and promise delivered. So now let's talk about the budget, and it's my pleasure to give the floor to the Chief Economist of the Manty Tarawallie.
Thank you very much.
But just before Sorry, sir. Just before he does his presentation, perhaps to recognize, I see we have with us the Director for Gender Affairs, Mr. Charles Vandy, and the Gender Advisor, Madam Marianne. So, thank you, most heartily welcome, and I'm sure you people, you have instructively contributed to this and getting us to where we are and for delivering this for the I think it's important for me to acknowledge your presence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamilu. Let me, before say anything on the budget, let me also join the Minister in congratulating the Minister of Gender and Children Affairs for putting through this very important act of Parliament, Gender Empowerment Act. We worked in the Ministry of Finance relentlessly with the Director over there, Mr. Vandy, towards the development of this particular act under what we call development policy operations for development partners. So when we had that news on Monday, that was really, really great. That at least we succeeded in having this gender being passed. As the Minister also observed, we in the Ministry of Finance, we actually started before even the passage of the bill. We now introduce what she called gender responsive budgeting. So we want to make sure that in both the budget planning and execution, gender issues are taken into consideration. So we are part and parcel of this great achievement. Thank you very much, Madam Minister, and thank you, Director Vandy. Now, on the budget, I'm sure most of us here are aware that every year the Minister of Finance will present a budget to Parliament. Sometimes it is done once a year in most cases, but in the recent times you'll observe that it's been done twice a year. So by the middle of the year, the Minister of Finance will present what we call a supplementary budget. And this is simply because of the dynamic nature of the global economy, the way things are moving in the global economy. You anticipate certain developments, certain achievements. In 2 or 3 months' time, things change, and you have to go back to the drawing board and set new policies, to achieve our economic and social objectives. So I'm sure all of us are also monitoring developments in the global economy. In recent times, the world has gone through several challenges, several crises. They are not only several, but they are also overlapping. So they come one after the other, in successive, manner. And they tend to reinforce each other. So you have a crisis, it leaves behind certain challenges. The next crisis simply reinforces or exacerbates those challenges. So these are the problems that we are facing. Let me just take you back slightly. If we remember way back in 2020, the minister presented a budget. In that budget, we anticipated a lot of things. Just give you one indicator that we normally monitor, which I'm also very familiar with. We expected the economy at that time, coming from the past, we expected the economy to continue to grow. So in 2020, we expected the economy to grow by 4.2%. By March of 2020, we all know what happened, the COVID crisis, the COVID pandemic. We did not achieve that growth rate. In fact, we revised it twice in a year. We first revised it from 4.2 to 2.2. And later on, we thought it was going to be a brief phenomenon, but it happened that the crisis lingered on, disrupted everything. At the end of the day, the economy contracted. Fortunately, by the end of the year, to the early part of the following year, the crisis waned. All restrictions that were imposed were lifted. We saw the economy rebounded. Those of you are following the numbers by 4.1%. So we hope that will continue into 2022. So in 2022, we projected the economy to grow by 5.9%. We are very optimistic the way things are going based on the policies we have laid. Again, in the early part of 2022, by February, we heard about the Ukraine crisis. Then we are now familiar with the impact. We can talk about it. We had to revise our growth projections again from 5.9 to 3.6 as we speak. We further revised those growth projections to 2.8. And this is also happening in the world. The world economy has been, the growth prospects of the world economy have been downgraded twice during the year. Now we are in fact anticipating that the world economy will go into recession. Now, Sierra Leone is not an island. We are part of this global economy. So we have spillovers from these global developments. Right? We know what is happening. We've seen sharp increases in prices of goods and services, particularly food. We've seen the exchange rate depreciating, and a host of other challenges. Now, we assess the impact of these developments on the lives and the livelihoods of the people, particularly those segments of our society that we call vulnerable groups, because this impact is, all of us are feeling the impact of what is happening in the global and local economy, but it impacts more on certain categories of people out of no fault of theirs. It's just because of where they find themselves. So what we've done in the 2023 budget is to assess this global and regional and local development and propose policies that can address these issues, particularly the impact of these developments on the vulnerable groups of our society. So that's basically what the 2023 budget has done. So you will observe that the budget seeks to achieve a number of things. If you look at what's happening, because of the sharp increase in the price of food, a lot of people are food insecure. You may not know this, but the estimates by the WFP say about 2 million Sierra Leoneans are food insecure. That means they cannot actually afford the full set of meals per day. That's very serious. So the budget seeks to address the food insecurity situation in the country. We all know that government has a flagship program that benefits a lot of vulnerable people, especially children. So the budget seeks to support government investments in education, health, which is our famous human capital development project. As I said, there are people also in the society who are not, despite all these efforts, they need special attention, and therefore we have what we call social protection. These are programs implemented by NACSA, and so government is supporting also the rolling out of those social safety nets. In the midst of all this, we should not leave behind the issue of the high prices and the depreciating exchange rate, because that's really what is causing a lot of pain on people. So the government, the budget also proposes policies that will seek to contain inflation and stabilize the exchange rate. But doing all of this requires resources. So in as much as government wants to do this, government also wants to promote growth, because without growth there will be no jobs, and without growth we will not address poverty. So in the budget also, in addition to this, I call them social measures, we also have measures that will promote the growth of this economy by reforming the financial sector, by supporting small and medium-scale enterprises, by improving the business environment, and more importantly, by continuing to invest in infrastructure, roads, energy, water, ICT. Now, for us to be able to do all of this, we also have to generate our resources, because without resources, we cannot actually do all of this. So the budget also proposes measures on how government can raise additional revenue. But this time, note, the minister emphasized that government is not going to increase taxes, and all tax rates as they are now will remain unchanged. So there will be no change in tax rates as we move along in 2023. So the way we are going to raise revenue is by just enforcing the existing provisions in the tax laws and try to broaden the tax net. So those people are outside the tax net, we'll try to bring them within the tax net. At the same time, we'll look at expenditures and see whether we can restructure the expenditures, reprioritize them to actually favor the more vulnerable people in our society. So that's why we're going to create what we call a fiscal space for addressing the issues I've mentioned so far. In doing all of this, one critical element is important: governance. Without governance, donors will not have confidence in you. Without governance, investors will not have confidence in you. So this budget also seeks to find ways to improve governance. And we have famous issues around us. I'm sure journalists are very familiar about these issues. Issues about the Auditor General's report, right? So this budget is also trying to find ways of improving on how we implement the Auditor General's recommendations. And also we have enterprises established, created by governments, whose operations also sometimes pose significant risks to the budget, what we call state-owned enterprises, or SOEs for short. We are also going to look at those and find ways of improving our operational and financial viability. So these are the main objectives and main areas where the budget focuses. And the last part of the budget, as most of you know, we now present the numbers, how much is allocated to a particular ministry or department in order to achieve what we have just mentioned. So if you have read the budget, you will see that we have an introduction. But more importantly this time also, because government is very much concerned about the welfare of people, we try to highlight some of those policy measures government has been implementing to mitigate the impact of all these crises on the people, because sometimes we forget very quickly, because some people say, the government did not say. So right in front of the minister's budget statement, catalog all what government has done. For those of you who have read the budget, those of you who have not, we try to talk about it if you are interested. And then we move on to the objectives of the 2023 budget, which I've highlighted, and then the policy priorities, which I've also highlighted: food security, human capital development, social protection, infrastructure, private development, strengthening finances, improving governance, and so on and so forth. Right. And then we present the budget. That's the numbers allocated to ministries. But we also, because all what we are doing, the budget is a plan. We have also tried to identify the likely risks. Because don't say you said this and this is the outcome. For everything we do, there are risks associated with what we do. So we identified in the budget those risks that are likely to derail the budget if they materialize. Right. So this is, as economists have said, certainly variables, if all things remain equal, we hope to achieve all those objectives that I mentioned earlier. So let me stop here and wait for your reaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it's time for us to interrogate the two presentations. But the important thing is that the budget seeks to address vulnerabilities, and it's focusing on vulnerable groups. And it's also important for us to know that every country in the world now is in a dire economic situation. I was just watching that the UK is now in a recession, and there's a projection that this recession might last for up to a year. So it's not just Sierra Leone. And when the Chancellor was delivering his autumn statement, he also mentioned COVID-19 and the Ukraine-Russia crisis as very key factors for the economic situation in which United Kingdom finds itself. So every country in the world is going through a difficult economic situation. So I want to give you an opportunity now, our friends in the media, to ask our key and critical questions. And so I'll ask Joe again to coordinate this session.
Thank you, sir. Please, let's avoid the preambles. Go straight to the question, and you can direct your questions to the two guests we have. Two questions, please. Yeah? Announce your name, media house, and then you ask your question. Okay, Mr. Kone.
Mohammed Kone is the name, and I work for Standard Times newspaper. From Dr. Alimami. In the budget, I saw you mentioned the SDI, Special Living Rights, and in the last budget, the 2022 budget, $45 million was spent in various areas. But as we speak up to now, ministries, departments, and agencies that we are supposed to utilize those funds are still arguing that we've now received those SDI. And there's a mention of SDI in the 2023 budget. That is just one aspect. The second aspect is that allocation to Ministry of to the health sector is 10.0% for 2023, and we are still far below the 15% Abuja declaration. Why is that so? And let me come to Madam Manty. I know you did a whole year of consultations since 2021. We have those concerns from people, from women. We have those concerns when enacting this law. And secondly, how soon do we see President sending his signature to the law and the implementation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, go ahead. I think you're audible.
Thank you. I'm Mohammed, Mayor of the Watch, Voice of Diaspora, and for the environment. Dr. Logura, the 2023 budget is seen as a very critical one because it interrupts with the coming elections come June 24. Where probably we'll be getting a new ministers who will be changing the policies and plans which have been presented to you now. How confidence that the budget you're planning now will be able to serve its purpose irrespective of what comes out of the given elections. Minister, we really know that what Baibura achieved is equally what Madam Ella Kobla achieved equally as well, when you talk of gender equality and all that. We, 61 years of independence, we have 30% quota in our groups. I think, should we wait for another 60 years of independence again to have another 30% quota to make it 60% and so on? The reason is that in other nations of Africa like Namibia, Botswana, Rwanda, women don't have to bargain with our male folks about percentages, hence you talk about equality. The fundamental purpose of equality is each and everybody, irrespective of his gender, to serve the nation equally as well the best he can. Why is it that you, in Sudan, you, as a woman, don't protest for equal representation instead of going on a quota basis?
Okay, next question. You want to ask another? No, give it to him. Give it to him. Let him ask another question. Just one. For the minister again?
Madam Minister again.
Okay.
Would you agree with me that had it not been for the intervention of His Excellency the President Julius Madadi, who concerns more about women liberation, your male folks in Parliament had really wanted to nullify Ethiopia? Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
It kept a long time before before it was approved.
Okay. Next question. Maybe
we can have the 2 man, 1 man.
After this one, the minister is going to respond before we take another round.
All right, thank you so much. First, I want to say thanks so much to Madam Minister for a job well done and for making sure that the bill was passed in Parliament. It was not easy. But my concern is why does the 2 man, 1 woman provision not apply to presidential appointees? And then secondly, is the bill after parliamentary scrutiny reflective of your original intention? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you respond.
Thank you for the questions. Concerns from the consultation, were they taking concerns? Yeah, you can hear me? Okay. Concerns from the consultations across the country, were they taken into cognizance when we presented and what's in the bill now? Absolutely, 100%. All the concerns that were raised were taken into account and were put in the bill. Let me draw attention when I spoke about gender mainstreaming, which is a key component in the Act. That provision, although gender mainstreaming, that provision, I think there is some difficulty of people understanding what it means, but that provision ensures that every sector in the country, every ministry, every policy, every legislation will have the gender requirements and dimension integrated within it. And so that is a key component that reflects all the demands and all the recommendations, or most of the recommendations that have come from our consultations across the country. When will President sign it? I can't sit here and say, but we are, negotiating and talking to him. He is definitely in favor of signing it. This is a key manifesto commitment, and his commitment has been, without a question, so I don't expect it to be long. Why does the 30% quota not applicable, or why did we go for a 30% quota? In normal circumstances, we will expect it to be 50-50, but there is absolutely no country in the world that has succeeded in gender equality. There are some areas that are good, but there are some areas that are not so good. There is no country that the United Nations or the UN Women, as a body within the United Nations, have declared a country that has achieved gender equality. So you have to start from where you are, and this is a beginning. And we're not saying it is 30%, we're saying at least 30%. So it can be more than 30%, it can be 40%, it can be 50%. But as a start, this is a significant start for us, from where we're at to where we're aiming to get to, with at least 30%. From there, we will continue. You have to start from where you are. Why did it take so long to achieve? It took a long time for a number of reasons. One, it was actually our strategy to get some other bills passed into law first before ours come in, but also we wanted everybody to be on board. We wanted to do the consultations well, so that the concerns from women and men will be taken into account. Absolutely, the voice of the president, the intervention of the president, being supportive of the act, and the drive for gender equality played a significant part. So all in all, it happened as we wanted it to. Why quota not applicable to appointment positions by His Excellency? The Constitution protects the President's rights to select persons for his cabinet, and freely without any mandate or instructions. So as a result of that, you cannot give the president a directive to do a certain or select or appoint people as per quota. But what the bill has done cleverly is to guide the president to say that in his appointments, to take due consideration to appointing at least 30% being females or being women.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Yes,
Thank you very much. The question on the SDRs. Yes, the IMF allocated SDRs to Sierra Leone, about $250 million. Part of those SDRs are being used by the Minister of Finance to support various activities in the budget. Well, I have not received any complaint from any ministry that they have not received their own share of the SDRs. But if you ask the Minister of Education, right, the SDRs for 2022, some of you go towards school feeding program. You want to know the amount of money we have spent on school feeding during this year. Right, so check with the Minister of Education. Environment, but I forgot also to mention that this budget also takes care of environmental issues, the 2023 budget. The tree planting is also funded from the SDRs. Energy subsidies, the Minister mentioned the amount of money that government is spending on EDSA to make sure that we have electricity. EDSA's operations cannot cover its cost if you don't know. Right, arrears clearance, the government owes suppliers and so on and so forth. So those funds are also used to pay those suppliers. Cash transfers also by NAXA. So many and so the resources do not go to fund all the activities of a particular NGO. It goes to fund specific activities within the Ministry of within a particular ministry. So for the Ministry of Education, it's school feeding. Fine. So and for those who have spent all those monies. Besides, also know that the SDRs have been used to support the private sector to import fuel for this country, right? And the minister also mentioned that amount of money. Well over $200 million has been used just to support the private sector to import fuel so that we have fuel at all the gas stations at all time. Yeah. Now, on the issue of the health, well, look at where we are coming from. Sometimes it's good to look at where you are coming from, where you are, and where you want to go. Now, the allocation to health was dismal, it was very low. You know, health expenditures are mostly funded by donors, but in recent years, those expenditures have been increased. I mean, we moved to 6%, now we're about 10%. So I'm sure in the next 2-3 years, we'll get to the 15% we are all looking for.
From 10.5 to 10%.
Well, in the current circumstances where we find ourselves, even maintaining our allocation is really an achievement. It's not that easy, my brother. Revenues collapsed. You know, just in this year, you know, for the first half of the year, we recorded shortfalls in domestic revenue collection. I'm sure you must have seen that in the minister's debate. The reasons for that, again, because of the ongoing challenges we have in the global economy. So even to maintain, you know, and then some of the donors that were also funding, also because of constraints in their own economies, have not been able to provide support to us. So when you put all those factors together, you know, so for if it's not for the priority that government places on health, you will not see 10% on health. For some ministries, are receiving lower allocation than they received last year, you know, because the resources are simply not there. Yeah. On the issue of elections and whether this budget will serve its purpose after elections, well, I cannot tell the outcome of the elections, right? But the current budget is closely aligned with the priorities of the present government. Right? If you look at the National Development Plan, when we do allocations in the budget, it's line by lines, by clusters. First cluster, human capital development. Second cluster, economic diversification. Third cluster, infrastructure and competition. And it goes like that, right? So I'm assuming that after elections, this budget will continue to serve its purpose. Yeah. And if anybody understands what's going in the global economy, really, this budget is not about a particular group of people. It's about the Sierra Leone economy. And these are the challenges that are affecting the global economy, the regional economies, and Sierra Leone in particular. So I think the budget is in place, unless somebody else wants to do something different. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take the final set of questions. Yes? Yes, Ariel. Where is the mic? Okay, you can ask your question. I think you are audible enough. I don't know. Are you? Okay.
Out of protest.
My question goes to the Minister of Gender. Even though Parliament has passed the bill into law, the Gender Equality Bill, there are some folks in the female populace that they argue that the act which Parliament have already passed into law does not reflect the original purpose or intention of the ministry. Let me quote the words of some female politicians that we are not giving of what we asked for, meaning that the new act does not reflect the original purpose or intention of the ministry. So my question is, do you feel betrayed by members of Parliament to an extent that what you requested for was not given to you? Two, the election is fast approaching, and the new act gives directive that 30% of female representation in the political landscape, meaning that during election or before the process of election, women of every political party should have 30% of symbol awarding to female politicians. And we are fastly approaching the 2023 election. How will your ministry work to ensure that some of the directives in the new act reflect its purpose?
Okay. Next question.
Just take two of you and then we
Yeah,
This particular question goes to the Minister of Gender. Madam Minister, I just want to know some of the amendments made, some of the clauses in the draft bill concerning the gender bill. What are these amendments? What are the already on the impact? Because they have the amendments. Then secondly, is does law inclusive to persons with disability? What is the impact?
I'm coming back to the budget. I have done a whole bit around the SDI, and I know the ambulance service is still struggling to receive funding from the SDI. So I know. Let's discuss a bit of that. Coming back to the budget, I'm quoting directly from the budget that debt service payments, including accounted for 37% of domestic revenue and 20% of total expenditure at the end of June 2022. So basically, debt service is one huge challenge that we have that is taking a huge chunk of the money. So how do we hope to sustain this debt service against the healthy needs?
Okay, Madam Minister, your response.
Thank you very much. First question was betrayed by Parliament, and the short answer is no. We asked for a quota of political representation for women, we got. We asked for a quota for appointments for women, we got. When it comes to appointments, if you listened carefully from when I was making the presentation, it was divided into two. There are appointments made by President. There are other appointments that are not made by President. The appointments that are not made by President, there's a quota attached to it. The appointments that are made by President, there is an encouragement for President to ensure that at least 30% of the appointments are women. So absolutely do not feel betrayed. I feel it represents the demands from women, what women were crying for. The spirit of the bill hasn't changed. What the purpose of the bill is hasn't changed. It's actually reflected in the act. It was not removed. So I don't feel betrayed in any shape or form, in any way. If anything, we are really appreciative of Parliament, that they listened to the argument, that they were well informed by the reports that we presented, and they were ready to make that change and follow the direction of what women wanted. In terms of the 30% representation, you yourself in your question, of the second question, are basically saying that the 30% representation has been given. And so you are saying, what will the ministry do? So that in itself says that what we requested, we got. So now what will the ministry do? The ministry has been and will continue to work with political parties to ensure that the criteria for selection is harmonized, so that we're all speaking from the same hymn sheet. And we're also encouraging women that are interested in politics to really register with political parties. As a ministry, we're also doing workshops for all female candidates within all political parties, to educate them so that they understand what they're getting themselves into, bring their partners along and their families, so that they all as a family understand what is the requirements of being an MP. So we're supporting the process, and we're also working very closely with PPRC to ensure that what we are really going for, what the spirit of this is about, that it is followed. Before now, the ministry and PPRC have traveled across the entire country, all 16 districts, doing presentations to with political parties, presenting what's in the bill, what is expected of political parties, how they can encourage women to get involved, what the criteria should be for selection. So we've been doing that work. We're going to continue to do that work so that we're all on the same page and we can see more women come forward. We know the reasons why women don't come forward. We know why women feel, the need to not participate in politics but are interested in politics. We want to give them the assurance that the ministry will be supportive to prevent certain actions that they are afraid of happening to them. So that's where we're having those workshops, and we'll continue to have the workshop so that women have the confidence to come forward. The last question, does it include disability? Does it include women with disability? It includes all women. So women with disability are also included.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Yes, Mr.
Thank you very much. How are we going to address the issue of debt? This is a very important question, right? And debt is actually a challenge for most low-income countries. Remember, a long time ago, in the early 2000s, most countries benefited from the highly indebted poor countries initiative, and that reduced our debt levels to very low levels. But after that, most countries embarked on development programs, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So the debt started rising again. But in recent years, the deterioration in the debt situation is not really due to excessive borrowing. And this point is very important. It's simply, again, we go back to the crisis. Because the way you measure your debt is when your economy grows, you exports, you collect more revenues, then you should be able to service your debt. But what has happened during this period is that our economies are shrinking, our exports are shrinking, our revenues are shrinking. But at the same time, we need to provide services to the people. So that means you need to incur expenditures. Now, before this crisis, I always like to take people back. Now, if you understand the arithmetic, what makes your debt increase is your budget deficit. That is really the source of your debt. And what is this budget deficit? It's the gap between your domestic revenues and your expenditures. Now, in 2018, when government embarked on fiscal consolidation, government was able to improve domestic revenue collection from about 12% the previous year to about 13.8% of GDP. At the same time, we were able to control expenditures around 25%. What happened? We are able to reduce the budget deficit to 3.1% of GDP from over 7%. Right? When you have a budget deficit of 3% and lower, you will not accumulate that much debt, and you should be able to service your debt. But what has happened after that, in 2020, when the economy shrinked and revenues collapsed, again back we are now, by 2019, we are 14.6% of GDP revenues. We came back down to 13.8%. At the same time, expenditures increased about 25% of GDP because you need to respond to the crisis. And some of this response for some, this is information that some people don't know. The support we receive from partners, some of it sometimes is in grants, some of it is loans, right? But you need it because you are in a desperate situation. So during this period, in order to fill that gap of drop in revenue and high expenditures, you need to borrow. So the process of taking debt to respond to the crisis led to some accumulation of debt. And that this is clearly spelled out in the budget, the reasons why debt has accumulated in recent years. And we also propose measures to address them. But the key measure to address your debt is to reduce your budget deficit. So that's why in the budget we propose measures to increase revenues, we propose measures to contain expenditures. So, for instance, in 2021, because again of the Ukraine crisis, when revenues improved, but at the same time, there was need to continue to mitigate the impact of the lingering COVID, right, which went on up to the impact still with us. expenditures went to 28% of GDP. So that moved the budget deficit to around 7.4% of GDP. So remember, we are coming from 3%. And to fill that gap of deficit, you have to borrow. You have no choice. Either you borrow externally or you borrow domestically. Right? But we are now putting in place measures again to contain that deficit. So for instance, for 2023, we are looking at a deficit of around 3% or less. So we are going back where we are coming from. And once we are able to do that, what we call fiscal consolidation, we should be able to address the debt situation. Apart from that, we are not, as we speak, government is not borrowing any loan that is not concessional. So even if it's a loan, it has to have a large component of grants. So you are giving me money, let's say you are borrowing me $10 million, 3 million of that 30 million or 4 million of that should be grants. So I should be in a position to pay the remaining. So there are various measures that we are putting in place to make sure that government does not continue to actually accumulate more and more debt. But I think your point is a very important issue. It's taking away most of our revenues. When you take out the wage bill, you pay debt service, the amount that is available now to spend on MDAs, it's very challenging. Right? So we are putting measures to address. And this is common across all low-income countries. When you attend these international meetings, two things now come up: the debt situation, the climate change issue. Because these are important issues that are affecting everybody. I think that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your response. The Deputy Minister of Information will now give the closing remarks.
Well, on that note, I just wish to thank Minister Manty Tarawallie and your team for your presentation on the Gender Equality and Empowerment Act, and Chief Economist Arimami Bandura for speaking to the budget. And I ask all of us to play the crucial role in helping our people to understand what these two areas will mean for them and for Sierra Leone. And I want to thank you all for coming. See you again on Thursday.